Hello and welcome to Rater.hq After Dark. I'm your host Rater. And in this video, I still have a little bit of a migraine going on, so I'm just going to kind of muddle through it. Uh, the reason why I wanted to put out a video today rather than rest up is because we have had a recent change to the manual as of today. And I want to go ahead and highlight that. So there was a specific change that happened which updated how supplemental claims are processed by the raters. Okay. Now, what my fear is my fear for why I'm doing this video is because I want to cut off a lot of the other content creators that are going to tell you something that is factually not true. Okay. So, what it's going to look like on here, and let me just try to muddle through this a little bit, is this is the specific change that we had as of today, September 18th, 2025. And the change to the supplemental claims process is specifically regarding um, when to add they added an important note about reasonably raised individual unemployability. Okay. And they wanted to, I mean, the main thing that they were doing is like supplemental claims, case flow doesn't really exist hardly anymore. So supplemental claims need to be changed. But I think what's going to happen is a lot of people are going to take this statement out of context. So the reasonably raised individual unemployability. Now, what does that mean? Reasonably raised individual employability is when you do not specifically claim it, but the rater believes that there's enough evidence in order to reasonably raise it to issue and make it into a contention and do development for it to see if you want to potentially, like, let's say your back condition got rated at 40% and you make specific comments that satisfy the criteria for individual unemployability. At which point in time, the rater could take those specific comments and they could reasonably raise the unclaimed issue of individual unemployability and start potentially processing a claim for that. Now, that's going to seem well and good. So let's go ahead and scroll down and let's see what specifically the changes happen. So you can see, like, right here, anything that's got a line through it's been replaced, and obviously this change is effective as of today. We talk about the definition of a supplemental claim, that's fine. But this right here is where I think some content creators might take this out of context to perceive that IU can be reasonably raised, like that a supplemental claim can now be used to show that IU historically wasn't reasonably raised or come to some kind of weird conclusion. The only thing that this says is that it reaffirms that IU may be reasonably raised as part of a supplemental claim for other issues, even if IU was not previously claimed. So what it's saying is that the normal process that the rater can apply to, like, new claims, or like if you claim something for increase, we could potentially infer IU. They're saying in this one, even though it's been true forever, it's just they're clarifying it again for some reason, that on a supplemental claim, if you meet the criteria for IU, we can reasonably raise it within that context also. So, and this might seem like it's a really good thing, but it's no different than the way the process worked beforehand. If you specifically, and let me go change some stuff around here. So you still have to actually, let me go back here. Sorry for the migraine headache thing. So it talks about, like, you still have to follow the guidance in M21-1 for identifying reasonably raised IU. So the standards haven't changed at all. So let me go to that manual reference, 843B1F, for reasonably raised. Now, the problem that occurs with this is that you can't reasonably raise IU just based upon the comments that were made in like the economics part of a DBQ or the remarks section of a DBQ. In order to reasonably raise it, the veterans criteria, service connected criteria, must meet the minimum scheduler found in 38 CFR 4.16, which isn't the main barrier here, right? Like because you can have the criteria be met by conditions that are not at issue. So, like if you have 70% for mental health and you have 40% for your lumbar spine, and your lumbar spine is the only thing that prevents you from actually, having, being able to be employed, the fact that you have the 70% in the unrelated mental health can meet the criteria. So, it's the part that's below that where it says, and I can't actually touch this one for some reason. There is current evidence of unemployability due to service connected disabilities in the veterans claim folder or under VA control. And what that means is I have to know, number one, that you are unemployed. If I don't know that, I cannot reasonably raise IU. If you do not have gainful employment, like let's say you are employed, but you're not gainfully employed, I would need to know that specific fact. If I don't know either of those two specific facts, I can't reasonably raise IU. I also need to know that something to do with your service connection causes you to be unemployed, right? If you have migraines that are not service connected and that's the reason why you were why you were dismissed from your previous job, because they're not service connected, it doesn't have any play. I can't reasonably raise it. If the examiner says that, you know they believe that your disabilities could be potentially barriers to your employment, that is not the same as you saying that your service connected conditions are, caused you to be unemployed, right? And we need the latter one. We need the fact that you say that your disabilities are the reason why you specifically are not employed any longer in your prior job. And the reason why we need that is because the doctor saying those things is speculative as to why you don't have your prior job. You saying why you don't have your prior job is probative. It proves something. Like we take you at your word that that's the reason why you don't have your job. But the doctor can't attest to that because that's hearsay, right? They can say that your disabilities can cause barriers to your job. They can say that, this is how, his or her service connected conditions would impact the prior job, and that's fine. That's once we reasonably raise IU by meeting the required criteria, then those statements by the examiner would be probative to the rater. So I just wanted to kind of address this because I honestly feel like um, somebody's going to take this out of context and say, hey, look, what this means is now anything that was denied, like any time that you were denied, right? And I mean, here, I'm going to do the banner thing. Very important. So, the example I'm going to give is not true, right? So, it's not, this is like what I'm going to say is my fear. My fear is that somebody out there is going to misunderstand this and say, oh, well, what this means is that anytime that you were denied historically, you can look to see if you should have had IU reasonably raised, and that's grounds to do an appeal because they didn't reasonably raise it beforehand. That is not true. Please don't do that. Please do not make that assumption because that's not what this is for. It's just reaffirming to the rater that within supplemental claims, you can reasonably raise IU in that moment, at that time, in the current context. So if you do a supplemental claim on, like, let's say a denial from 2000, We're just talking about the date range from when, like right now, in the here and now. We're not talking about the 2000 rating decision. You're not reasonably raising it all the way back in time to then. That would require a clear and unmistakable error and probably a higher level review to do something to that miraculous. What we would be talking about is you were previously denied in 2000 for, let's say, your back condition. I'll keep with that analogy, but that back condition, you started out at 10%. You recently filed a claim for increase and were denied. You submit a supplemental claim and say, hey, look, I have new evidence that shows, yes, I do have, more severe, I didn't include my private medical records last time. I'm including them this time. And because I'm including them this time, please see, review for a higher evaluation. So in that event, what would happen is we would reasonably raise the IU based upon the most recent examination, the most recent reports within this particular supplemental claim as to whether or not, IU can be reasonably raised. So if you don't tell us that you are unemployed, the rater should not reasonably raise IU because we are not supposed to raise things to issue just to deny them. Like if I don't know for certain that you are eligible for IU, then I shouldn't be doing it. But a lot of raters do. Okay? And I don't understand why. And there's two schools of thought on how to reasonably raise. You can reasonably raise within um, the current claim, or I'm a fan of having the putting on a code sheet note, basically telling the authorizer to send out a letter to you, the veteran, and say, "Hey, look, we kind of, would you like and solicit a claim for IU? Would you like to claim for IU? Because if I do that second one, then you have the choice as to whether or not you want to pursue it. However, if the rater reasonably raises IU and prematurely without knowing whether or not it's truly and factually able to be granted, then we're going to deny something that should have never been raised to issue to begin with. And that's grounds for an error. And I don't, I know that you guys don't want to hear about errors and things like that, but it's 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 kind of the way that there's a best practice way to do something, and they tell you to reasonably raise it in the claim you're in if you can prove it to be true. The problem that I have is a lot of the newer raters do not prove it to be true. They just go, "Oh man, he said his back hurts him and it hurts him at work. Okay, IU." And it doesn't do any good. Plus, I mean, it gives you a false sense that we're, you know, the the uninformed rater or the newer rater that prematurely raises it to issue. Kind of I don't like how it makes you feel as the veteran. Like it gives you false hope that we're trying to give you IU when they're just they're flailing because they don't know the full intricacies of how to do it. So they're just doing things so that way they can check a box to say that they did it. The raider, the unskilled raider. Because it typically takes 2 years for a raider to at least be competent for the most part. That time frame can change, but it's kind of a fairly accurate assessment. So that's all I wanted to kind of talk to you guys about today was these changes that occurred in the M21. Just because, like I said, I wanted to get ahead of maybe some people's misunderstandings about what the intention of this is, what the potential ramifications of it are, and things like that. Because there, are, I don't know, there are some people that they look into things and they see with rose-colored glasses and see what they want to see, and I don't understand it. I mean, I guess I do understand it to some degree that, it should be the fact that, so, like if it should have been reasonably raised and it was a CUNE, then that should be addressed. But if it's not, and it's just this thing that they do, then I don't support that. But anyway, from Migraine Central, this is Rater, and I'd like to thank you all for continuing to watch the videos and sharing the channel with others. I'm planning on doing a video tomorrow about the amputation rule. I had somebody in an email send me kind of an example of what their circumstances were in a loose way, and I found out that they had the amputation rule erroneously applied to their claim, so it lowered they should be 80% or something like that, and it lowered them down to like 50 or 40% erroneously because a non-qualifying condition was um, used to invoke the um, migraine, the amputation rule. And basically, this is me just kind of prefacing for tomorrow's video saying that even when you guys get a favorable rating decision, you guys still need to double check them. Double check it with your VSO. If you got a savvy VSO, double check it with, you know, uh, your guys' reviews, because a lot of you veterans out there are so skilled that you're probably better than the VSRs in a lot of circumstances. So just be cautious. I'll talk more about it in tomorrow's video, but that's about all I got for you today. Thank you for listening to my painful ramblings. And yeah, that's about all I got for you. So, Raider out.